Imagine a king, beloved by his people and blessed by God, betrayed by his own son. A story of power, ambition, and a broken family bond. David, the great king of Israel, faces the greatest conflict of his life, to fight against the one he loved the most, his son Absalom. What could have driven Absalom to try and steal his father's throne? How did David handle this painful betrayal? In this video, you'll uncover the hidden details of this dramatic rebellion, where love and duty collide tragically. Get ready for a story filled with loyalty, pain, and redemption. The betrayal began subtly. Absalom, one of David's sons, was charismatic, handsome, and ambitious. He started sowing the seeds of his rebellion by winning the favor of the people, approaching dissatisfied citizens and promising justice. He positioned himself strategically at the city gates, listening to the people's problems and offering advice, something a king would normally do. David, trusting his son, didn't see the growing threat. Gradually, Absalom captured the hearts of the Israelites, using his popularity to weaken David's leadership. The stage was set for rebellion, and Absalom, patient and calculating, moved his pieces with precision. As the people began to see Absalom as a potential leader, he built his support base in secret. The loyalty he gained from the Israelites positioned him as a viable alternative to David's reign. His plan wasn't just to take power from his father, he aimed to usurp the throne. In his heart, Absalom believed he could be a better king than David, more just, closer to the people. The preparation for rebellion was meticulous, involving the support of key political and military figures who saw in him a chance to change Israel's future. David, meanwhile, was distracted by the usual challenges of ruling and blinded by his unwavering trust in his son. Absalom's betrayal was carefully orchestrated to avoid suspicion until the right moment. David's love for Absalom and trust in his son's character kept him from seeing the signs of conspiracy. Absalom, recognizing this, capitalized on the vulnerability he created within the kingdom. The relationship between father and son deteriorated, but David had no idea of the extent of this rupture. When Absalom felt the time was right, he openly declared his rebellion. He gathered his army, formed by those he had won over throughout the years, and marched toward Jerusalem. The kingdom was on the verge of an epic confrontation between father and son. David, caught off guard, was forced to face the reality of the betrayal. Absalom's plan was in motion, and David's reign was now at risk. The loyalty of his followers would be tested, and the king would need to make decisions that would affect the future of Israel. Upon discovering Absalom's betrayal, David was forced to make one of the hardest decisions of his life: to flee from Jerusalem. For a king, abandoning his throne was a dangerous move, but David knew that facing his own son in direct conflict would be devastating for both him and the people of Israel. The pain of betrayal hit him hard. His son, whom he loved deeply, now saw him as an enemy. David's flight wasn't just a military strategy. It was also an attempt to deal with the bitter reality that Absalom had turned against him. As David left Jerusalem, accompanied by his most loyal allies, the weight of the situation seemed to grow heavier with each step. The king, who had faced countless external enemies with courage, now found himself fleeing from his own son. The heavy silence of his departure was only broken by the sound of his followers' footsteps, loyal to the king, but fully aware of the gravity of what was happening. Many wondered, how could a man chosen by God to lead Israel find himself in such a desperate situation? The loyalty of those who fled with David was a comfort to the king, but it also reminded him of how divided the nation had become. Some remained by his side, while others, influenced by Absalom's charisma and promises, chose to support the rebellion. Among the allies who fled with David were his most valiant warriors and counselors who had helped build his kingdom. Yet none could ease the personal pain David felt from being betrayed by someone he never imagined would become his enemy. During his flight, David prayed. He knew that in moments of great distress, only his faith could give him the strength to continue. This exile was unlike any other challenge he had faced, for it involved not just the temporary loss of a throne, but the possible permanent loss of his son. David's journey, both physical and emotional, was marked by the constant reminder that love and betrayal sometimes come from the same hands. The confrontation between David and Absalom was inevitable, even though neither of them truly wanted it to happen. On one side, David, an experienced king who ruled with justice and wisdom. On the other, Absalom, young and impulsive, driven by his desire for power and ambition to take the throne. The tension between father and son wasn't just political, but deeply emotional, filled with resentments and misunderstandings. Both knew that Israel's fate would be decided in this conflict, but for David the battle was even more personal. He would have to fight against his own blood. Before the battle began, David gave his commanders a clear order: spare Absalom. The heart of a father spoke louder than that of a king. Despite the betrayal, David still loved his son deeply and did not want to see him killed. This command revealed how torn David was between the need to protect his kingdom and the desire to protect his son. He hoped that somehow the battle could end without bloodshed, at least concerning Absalom. On the battlefield, however, things unfolded differently. David's forces, more experienced and better trained, began to prevail over Absalom's troops. What started with great fervor soon turned into a demonstration of the strategic superiority of David's men. Despite this, David, distant from the direct confrontation, anxiously awaited news of his son, hoping that his command to spare Absalom had been followed. However, amidst the chaos of battle, Absalom, while fleeing, became entangled by his hair in an oak tree. Immobilized and defenseless, he became an easy target for Joab, the commander of David's army. Despite knowing the king's order to spare Absalom, Joab chose to act on his own, seeing Absalom as a threat that needed to be eliminated. Without hesitation, Joab struck the fatal blow to Absalom, sealing his fate and, at the same time, disobeying David's command. Absalom's death brought a tragic end to the confrontation. When David received the news, he was overwhelmed with grief. The pain of losing a son, even one who had betrayed him, was unbearable. David wept bitterly, saying, "Oh, my son Absalom, my son Absalom, if only I had died in your place." The battle had been won, but for David, this victory came at too high a cost. The end of Absalom's rebellion came in a tragic and unexpected way. The young prince, who had conspired against his own father, was betrayed by fate during his escape. As he rode through a dense forest, his long hair became caught in the branches of an oak tree, leaving him hanging, defenseless and unable to escape. His horse rode on, leaving Absalom suspended, vulnerable to whoever found him next. What happened afterward would seal the fate of the rebellion. Joab, David's general and a man known for making firm decisions, found Absalom in this state of helplessness. Despite David's explicit orders to spare his son, Joab chose to ignore the king's wishes. For him, the priority was to eliminate the threat that Absalom represented to the kingdom. Without hesitation, Joab struck the young rebel with 3 spears, ending the rebellion and securing David's victory. However, this action would mark the beginning of profound grief for the king. When news of Absalom's death reached David, the king was overwhelmed with a devastating sense of loss. He could not bear the thought that his son had died, even after all the harm Absalom had caused. David withdrew to a solitary place and, in tears, repeatedly expressed his anguish. "Oh, my son Absalom, my son Absalom, if only I had died instead of you, Absalom, my son, my son." It was the cry of a father who, despite the betrayal, still loved his son deeply. David's grief was so intense that it affected the entire army of Israel. The men who had fought bravely and won the battle returned to the city in silence, as if they had been defeated. The king's sorrow was so palpable that even their military victory lost its meaning. Joab, noticing the impact of David's reaction, confronted the king, reminding him that his excessive mourning was overshadowing the importance of what his men had achieved. Despite Joab's words, nothing could erase the pain David felt at losing Absalom. The victory over the rebellion seemed insignificant in the face of the mourning he experienced as a father. This episode became a painful lesson in the history of Israel, highlighting the heavy price of wrong choices and the devastating consequences of divisions within a family. Even as a great king, David learned that when it comes to family ties, the human heart is far more vulnerable. The story of David and Absalom shows us how power, betrayal, and love can change the course of a nation and a family's life. And if you want to dive deeper into these emotional and impactful biblical journeys, don't miss our special playlist on the journey of Abraham. Click here and immerse yourself in the stories of faith and trials that shaped the biblical heroes. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate notifications so you won't miss more fascinating content like this.